What's happening, beautiful people? Welcome back to the Thrive After Sports podcast. What you're about to listen to is an interview with Carlie Corrigan, who is the Director of Student Athlete Development at Fresno State. Shout out to Carlie for being an amazing host during my time visiting the school and speaking to the student athletes there. I thought it would be great to do an interview with Carlie talking about her journey into student athlete development and also talking about some of the great things she's working on at Fresno State, as well as giving some advice to future leaders in student athlete development. Carlie is someone who treats her role like she's still playing ball. She's a prime example of what it looks like to thrive after sports because she brings her athletic mentality to everything that she's doing at Fresno State. So without further ado, let's get into this interview with Carlie Corrigan. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Thrive After Sports podcast. This is actually a very special episode. This is my first in-person episode. I'm here with Carlie Corrigan, the Director of Student Athlete Development at Fresno State University. What's going on, Carlie?
Happy to be here. I'm honored to be your first in-person guest. I don't know if I knew that, but that's pretty awesome. No, I'm excited to just talk to you about what's going on in student athlete development and Fresno State, and we're excited to have you on campus.
Thank you. Yep. Carlie invited me to speak I'm speaking in like an hour or so. And one of the things I want to share with Carlie before we get into this today is Carlie is someone who very early on I was kind of watching from a distance. And I told you this when we first met. I have been watching some of the stuff you put out. And like there's something different about this programming, or maybe just how you were sharing things on LinkedIn and kind of your heart behind it, like your heart behind the programming itself. I was like, this is different. I have to reach out to this woman. And then when we had a conversation, it was very clear that you are someone who not only cares about the student athletes, and I know this sounds crazy, but as you know, I talk to a lot of people in student athlete development around the country, as you do too. Some people are there because it's just within their comfort zone. You know, it's kind of like, hey, I was an athlete, so I want to help other athletes. And some people are kind of just there for a paycheck, unfortunately, and I think that impacts the student athletes that they're serving. But I say all that to say, not to be negative, you were someone who very early on, it was clear to me that you actually wanted to make a difference, and you're doing that. And then also, like we were talking about recently, you are someone who does very well in your role with collaborating with the different departments. And I think that's important and a part of the job that gets overlooked, especially with the changing landscape of college athletics, which we'll get into. So, but before we start with that, I do want to kind of give a little bit of background of your story. I know you were a hooper, right? Let's talk about just your journey from, I know you didn't graduate, walk across the stage, and then, you know, just end up here at Fresno State. So what was that journey like?
Yeah, so former Southern Illinois Saluki, go Dogs, but had the greatest experience of my life. You know, it was everything that you could want being a student athlete to be. I grew, it changed me in more ways than I even knew right when I graduated, and from the people to my teammates to just the experience in general. So from there, I got my master's at the University of Memphis, so got to experience working in an academic services department and all that professional jazz. Had some great mentors through that program, and then I was one of the very few people in athletics that gets hired without knowing somebody, and Fresno State was that place. Very thankfully. So started as an academic advisor and learning specialist. We didn't have this role when I started. And I think that was really important in my journey because I was able to see the experience from the academic lens. And then when building this Bulldog Built program, I was able to really like collaborate and combine some things and some kind of nuggets that I learned from that experience into being like, oh, we can, number one, we should be very aligned in everything that we do. And number two, adding on to that, like they're getting an exceptional academic experience, but how do we make it more of an experiential, like holistic learning experience for them? And so that was, I think, more defining than I realized at the time. But now, you know, doing Bulldog Build, I'm the first person to hold this position here. And that's been really fun. And so I'm really thankful you kind of took note early on before we even chatted of kind of the uniqueness of our program, because we really did build it in a way that made sense for our students and our student athletes. And so this community wraps its arms around anything that Fresno State does. We're the biggest show in town. And so being able to have the connectivity with the community and also again, build it in a way so they would be involved, because we want them involved, we need them involved, and just kind of all of the partnerships, even within our department, were critical.
Mm-hmm. I noticed, Carlie, that often when we're talking, the word holistic comes up a lot. And that was probably one of the things that stood out to me most about you, is that holistic approach. I think that shines through in the way that this department operates and some of the things you guys are putting together. There's no box checking going on of like, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that. It's more about like, what is going to best serve the student athletes, and let's put together some programming around that. So essentially, I didn't know that you actually it sounds like this role was created for you, or you basically created this role, like coming from student success, right? Or learning specialist. Like, how did you I want to hear more, like, how did you basically create your own position? That's pretty cool.
Well, I wish that was actually the case, but it was being created from administration.
Okay.
So they had created this role because we needed it. We were a little bit behind the times in developing that for our level. And so they created it, and then I was fortunate enough, like through the interview process, and there was competition and all the things, I was fortunate enough to be able to be the one to do it. And I think, a combination of just my knowledge and understanding of our campus and our community, and having done naturally some of the work already. I go back to the COVID times and working with our baseball program. A lot of them should have been drafted and they weren't drafted. And so we were I was helping them through that transition that was unexpected. They went from March being like, oh, I'm going to be a top 10 draft pick to, oh, there's only X amount of rounds now. So kind of working on a expedited process through some of this stuff with them really kind of sparked my interest. And then it just happened in 2021 that this department was essentially created, and I was fortunate to be able to be the person.
So you cut your teeth during COVID times, forged in the fire of COVID, so to speak, Yeah,
which turned out to benefit me for sure. I had some experience at University of Memphis, but not a ton and so just my experience here, being able to wear a lot of hats, really provided that opportunity.
Right.
So a lot of hats is never a bad thing, in my opinion.
That's right. Yeah, for sure.
I like, as much as we can get our hands on, I'm gonna get my hands on it. So
let's talk about wearing a lot of hats, because as we were you were giving me a campus tour, and it kept coming up. You were telling me about the idea of the way you collaborate with different departments, with the rapidly changing landscape of college athletics. You got NIL, you got, you should be telling me this, but like, how do you navigate those waters, and how intentional are you about making sure that you're collaborating with other departments, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and I think that goes to the holistic word, so not only did my transition from being a student athlete make me emphasize the importance of a holistic, life really, but like real balance, and making sure that we kind of had our feet really rooted in all areas, but I think that plays into the collaboration, plays into being able to provide those holistic experiences. Because if I don't know what's going on with name, image, and likeness, that's going to be really hard for me to be able to help show our student athletes how, number one, that is a job. So you can put that as work experience. Anyone who's not, you're missing the boat a little bit, right? Like, you are getting paid. Influencers are full-time people. If your social media is your jam, going to appearances, that's a job. So if I don't know that, and I don't have the wherewithal to have those conversations with those people, I'm doing our student athletes a disservice, because now I'm not able to speak their language and meet them where they're at, so to speak. So from that standpoint, I think it's really important. But then also from a community standpoint and everything they can provide. We are a university, we have great resources, but also we're higher education. And so we need to be able to extend into, we have a high ag major population. Well, I need to be able to provide them with hands-on real world experience through our community. And our community is amazing, and they love doing that. And so that's where I'm really lucky, because it's an easy ask. But without having the side of the experiential learning piece, it can, that's not holistic in my opinion. That's a check in the box. Oh, your resume's done.
Right.
Good luck. Go get a job.
Right. Man.
And we all know that's not how it works, right? People that work for 15 years struggle sometimes. So I think that's really the relationship piece, the holistic piece of, it's more than just like, hey, director of NIL, like, what do you think? No, it's really like getting into the weeds and the nitty gritty of things and being like, hey, like, help, like, what do I need to know? How can this mean more than just what it says on paper?
From what you've seen or just conversations that you've had with your peers at other universities, do you feel like there's a lack of, cross-department collaboration? Is everyone, because typically from what I see, people I talk to, it's kind of everyone's in their own silo, just trying to keep their head above water, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it really just depends. This has been my only full-time institution that I've worked at, so I think it really depends. Some people have really great cross-collaboration, I think. Some people maybe not, and some people have none. And so what I always talk to people, especially in the student-athlete development role, is your coworkers are going to be your biggest advocates, your best allies, because they're going to keep you in tune with kind of everything else that's going on. So you can be aware of opportunities like our marketing program. They have an amazing internship program. We have so many student athletes that want to be in marketing, whether it's social media marketing, whether it's game management, whether it's sports information. But if I don't know that, how can I provide that opportunity for them?
Right.
So you have to just really like get out of the silo and work on those relationships. It's the same thing with fundraising. I think I've shared with you before, like I've had an amazing career champion who's now moved on and is an athletics director because he's awesome, that encouraged me to know how to fundraise. And so because of that, I've been able to navigate some of those conversations that I've raised money for the program. And it's, it's twofold. It's an openness on their end to give me access and information, but it's also a willingness to learn outside of your job description. And so, and I'm also, grateful for my supervisor that's encouraged that as well, that, she's allowed me to do that because it's been beneficial for our student athletes. And so, it starts with a relationship, and then I think there's a functional piece that you add on to that of like, okay, like let me help myself.
Right. On that note of helping yourself, personal development. I want to actually, before we get into personal development, I have to say something about this fundraising piece because this is important. Because I think something you said to me when we were walking around earlier is really important in the sense that, like, I work with a lot of athletes who want to get into student athlete development in some way, shape, or form. They want to be in an athletic department and around athletes. The first thing about that is I'm always very intentional about like making sure that they're wanting to do that because it's the right thing and not just in their comfort zone. But another thing is that I don't know if they really understand the work that goes into it, and then also the level that you need to improve yourself to constantly get better at your craft, just like you do in your sport, right? And so on the fundraising piece, and this I guess ties into personal development in a roundabout way, but you were telling me that at a certain point I can't remember his name, the guy who you said moved on. And, but he was basically telling you like, hey, you can actually go do this on your own. And he was actually helping you become a better fundraiser. How important do you think that is when, and I'm just trying to set the expectations for those guys listening, because some people think like, yeah, this is an easy job where I just basically get to put a bunch of resources in front of athletes and they love me and I'm like the hero. But like, how much work from a fundraising or otherwise, how much work goes into actually making things like this happen to put resources in front of student athletes?
Yeah, well, it definitely was not an overnight operation, but it was probably like 2 years worth of me spending time like learning, and again, like his willingness to show me some of those like layers of fundraising. Like, it's not, you just don't go ask people for money, whether it's $100 or $1 million. Like, you just don't go ask for people. You just don't do that. That's not how it works, right? It's about stewardship. It's about thanking people 7 times. It's about like all of those types of things. Yeah, I'm stealing your words, Tim Collins. I'll shout them out right there. AD at Eastern Washington. I'm stealing your words. But the 7 thank yous and like making sure there's that connectivity, and you're not just always asking them for something. Like you're remembering things about people, and so over the course of 2 years, he would bring me to lunch and with the donors, and just kind of I just got to observe how he navigated those conversations, and it in turn by year 3 it was like, okay, like this is what you need to do. go for it. And I was like, oh, okay.
Wow.
But it was a great learning experience, like start to finish, because now it's a matter of just being more comfortable, right? But again, it's twofold. It's them being willing to open that door and me being willing to be uncomfortable in the beginning and like learn and then be able to do it, you know?
Right.
And once you get out of the comfort zone, I think things come a little bit more, it just becomes more simple. Right?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you're getting your first start, right? Like you're always nervous. You're shaking.
Right.
Shaking. And then, 2 years later, you're laughing at the freshman. That's like, you see him shaking and you're like, oh my gosh.
Right.
Just don't turn the ball over. So.
That's actually a perfect segue. You talk about getting out of your comfort zone. Obviously, you're someone who's very into personal development. You take that seriously. We have been talking about that pretty much this whole time, the way you grow and develop yourself. But just in general, and I know like you can really only speak to probably Memphis and Fresno State, but what is it? Let me just come out and, like, before we started recording, all right, folks, check this out. I didn't know this, all right? So Carlie was telling me that you actually have to apply for personal development a lot of times as a student athlete development professional, which I did not know. I just assumed that the resources were being put in front of you guys, just like you guys put resources in front of the students. So what can you speak a little bit to that personal development side of things when it comes to the folks who are serving the athletes?
Yeah, so there's tremendous programs, as we all know, in all the organizations. They've impacted me a whole lot. Like, they're really, really like top-notch, top tier. I think where the longer you're kind of in the space, your development diversifies, right? So, as somebody who's been doing this for X amount of years, my development should look different than somebody who maybe is in their first year or is walking into an already established program. Like, I needed development from a standpoint of being able to have hard conversations, being, talking to coaches and administration and leveraging and vouching for the program and being data driven, where that might be different if you're not having to do all of that in your first role, if that makes sense. And so I think that piece is really like the reflection from a personal standpoint of like, what do you need? And being okay. And I think as athletes, as former athletes, it's hard to sometimes be like, yeah, I'm just really not great in that area. But having kind of the courage almost to be like, I need help in this, or I need some sort of like program in that, and then taking the initiative to go find it. There's not always somebody in the gym with you when you're practicing. Like, it's the same parallel, right? So using free resources like LinkedIn, like Coursera, like, whatever that looks like for you in an area that you really want to develop. And I think also like to take that next step, right? Like, you start as a coordinator and then you want to be a director. Well, how are you going to get there? You can't always get that development from established programs. Like, it has to be something that you have to be self-aware enough to know where you need to grow, and then take the initiative and apply for the programs and all the things, right? But the reality is it might take you a try or two to get in, and that's okay. You can still not just be stuck, right? Like, you have to keep figuring out what that is.
Well, I love everything you said, but a couple of things that stood out to me specifically is just how you're talking about being proactive. And I think that you'll hear me talk about this a lot tonight, is like, kind of, we live in this bubble where we're athletes of everything is brought to us on a silver platter. And then when you're in a role even like this, which is still technically working with athletes, you have to still be proactive about, like you said, identifying what you need and then going and seeking that out. And then also something else you said is that, like, it's not easy for athletes to be able to say, I'm not good at this thing. And you're going to hear me talk about this tonight too, is like, I have this thing called, like, you're a freshman in life, basically, where you're going out and you're basically a rookie again. And you have to be comfortable with that and embrace that. And just like when you were a rookie in your sport, do what you need to do to learn from people above you and improve and things like that.
Right.
So now, you told me earlier today that sometimes there are conversations, like, and I know this is common across universities, where sometimes, like, athletes don't really see, or they don't understand why these things are important necessarily, the things that you, not just you, but everyone here is trying to put in front of them. And, like, honestly, I didn't see it either when I was 18, 19, 20, 21. Like, I'm just thinking about, when is this going to be over so I can go get some chicken strips before practice, right? And so how do you sort of, like, get that message across, and what methods do you use to make sure that people, or that the student athletes understand, like, this is important stuff and this is going to help you years beyond your time at Fresno State?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that relationship. Not only with the student athletes, but who are the players in their world, right? It could be a head coach, it could be an assistant coach, it could be their athletic trainer, it could be, you have to identify who kind of those gatekeepers are so that you can help from, again, a holistic standpoint, everybody see like what's happening and why, and going from there. So like relationally, being able to connect with student athletes, like that's what we're in. We're in the business of people, right? Like at the end of the day, in its purest form, we as practitioners are serving the student athlete population. So the relationship piece is, one side, but then the coaches and the support staff, I think, is another side. And so that takes getting out of your office. That takes asking people what's going on in your world. Well, and then they're going to ask you what's going on in yours. Then you can be like, X, Y, and Z. And they'll be like, oh, well, did you know? And I'm like, no, I didn't know that. I had no idea. Well, this makes a lot more sense now.
Right.
Like, I didn't know they were working after practice. That makes sense why they haven't shown up all semester. Okay, well, now I can tailor their experience more to them and check in a different way and be like, hey, I heard you're working. Like, A, is everything okay? That's always the first question.
Right.
And B, how can I support you in a different way? I get this doesn't work, that's totally fine. It's not a one size fits all because everyone's at a different place at a different time. So it goes really to those relationships and the stakeholder piece as well from coaches and administration of really being like, this is how we're doing it, this is why, and the transparency factor of that is something that I think my supervisor and I have really tried to make a priority and I think it's really helped because there's so much going on. There's so much going on all the time, like actually going on, like taking up time, and then just also like going on in everyone's life and in their work and all the things. So knowledge is power, and that's kind of something that I think has really helped. You might say it 5 times, and the 6th time they might be like, oh, I want to do that now. But that's okay, right? It's just having the wherewithal to know that it's not for everybody all at once, all the time, and that's okay. So really, like finding the relationships where they're at and how you can get to them. If that makes sense.
I love your approach to this role. Like I really do. I'm not just telling you that to gas you up. Like I just feel like you approach this like an athlete would, and I think that's so important. Like you approach this role and everything you do here like every day is game day, and you come in here like you're playing ball and you're trying to be the best player on the court for your teammates and for the athletes. That's really inspiring to me to see that. And so you've given us a really solid glimpse into what it's like day to day and what actually goes into this role, and not just what goes into this role, but what it takes to do this role well. What advice would you have for, like I said, I speak to a lot of athletes who think they have gone on to work in athletic departments and they're thriving, no pun intended, but some people would be better served to be doing other things. So for someone who's listening to this episode, they're like, yeah, I really do want to work in student athlete development or just in college athletics in general. What advice would you have for them, A, to make sure that it's the right path for them, and then B, to actually get a foot in the door and land a job in this industry or in this at a university?
Yeah, so in the exploration phase, there's no bad question. That is something I would really encourage people that want to get into the space to ask, because everywhere operates so differently. I could go, so I've been doing this for however many years now, and I could go somewhere else and it's just different, right? Like the way the campus operates, it's different. Sometimes like you're at campus, you have a dotted line to athletics instead of being part of the athletics department. And so just really do your research and understanding what the environment is like and who some of those like collaborative stakeholders are, because that will kickstart you on another level if and when you do get into that role and be like, okay, in my first 30 days, and then you can answer that question. First 30 days, I need to meet with Career Development Center, Money Management Center, fundraising, name, image, and likeness, whoever else kind of has a role at that institution, and those that you maybe don't directly connect to. What does an internship program look like on campus? Do we have one here? So just kind of really doing your research on the actual structure so that when you get the job, there's not a ton of time wasted and you kind of know the landscape that you're operating in. Because you could waste 2 months. You know, if you get hired in August, now it's October, and you're just figuring out, you know, the best place to get tables and chairs from. Like, you know, but that's real. Like, those are the types of things you know, there's event planning in this business, okay?
That was a funny example. You know that was a funny example, too. Like, 2 months in, you're like, man, where do I get these tables and chairs? That's a hilarious example right there.
So, but that wastes time, you know? Now I'm spending an hour and a half tracking them down.
That's real.
And I got 3 students outside my office. So it's all about, like, the efficiency of some of that, too. But, so that's one thing I would say. And then, you know, to get your foot in the door, networking, but that's really generic, right? That's a check of the box answer. But have a plan. Like, that is my biggest thing. So we have a 1-unit professional development class here. And, you know, that's something that I share with students all the time is don't, like, you have to have a plan. Like, make a plan for yourself. You're not going to know exactly what you do anytime you sit in a new role, right? Like, when there's a new person, it can be attacked differently, right? You have different strengths. You have different things that, you know, you value, and you're putting your own kind of flair on whatever it is, no matter what job you're in. If you're in a sales job, you could sell the same product totally different than me, but we could have the same sales and end of the year sales, right? So I think, number one, like, being super aware of your values and your value to the organization, but then how you would do the job. You have to tell people that. And, you know, honestly, my coworkers make fun of me, but, like, when I interviewed with my coworkers, I was so extra. And they weren't going to ask me a question because I already had it in front of them. So, you know, that's something that I really encourage them to, like, have some forethought of that. Like, see what the roles and responsibilities are in the job description, and then plan how you would do them. Or have at least informed questions on what that looks like. And I think it's the same in this industry. So take it, you know, a step beyond that networking, and, like, really think about some of that. And, you know, we had a guest speaker that's why he was our guest speaker, because he co-signed that. Like, his messaging was exactly the same. And I was like, yeah, I'm not even going to tell them. I'm going to let you tell them, because I've told them 100 things already. So, you know, I think that's part of it. But, you know, I chose him because I had already done that. I had already lived that. And so I think that's a super important thing. Like, don't just want the job, but know how you're going to do the job before you get it.
That was a bar right there. That was good. I like that. Now, you just gave some really solid advice for folks wanting to get into athletics. And you even kind of, because my next question was going to be general advice to athletes who are just trying to figure out how to transition into whatever it is that they want to do, right? And so, I mean, there are a lot of points you already shared, but, like, does anything else come to mind in terms of those athletes who are like, Carlie, I just really don't know, and I know you have these conversations all the time. I don't really know what I want to do. Like, how do you help athletes navigate those types of conversations?
I say connect with Taj on LinkedIn.
That's a great answer. No, that's a great answer.
No, but for me, it goes into their values. That is what I think, and that's something that I learned in my transition out, is if you can't identify that and you don't know what's stemming from those, it's going to be really hard for you to make a decision. And even if you don't make the right decision, you at least know how you got there.
Right.
And so, you know, that's something that I'm always like, okay, well, number one, let's identify, like, your strengths and where that might fit in. Like, what do you like? You know, let's talk about your strengths. But then really, like, what are your values? Oh, I love people. Okay, well, do you want to be in sales? I don't know. I'm not money motivated. Okay, well, then maybe sales isn't the thing. Maybe, you know, and not that all sales is money motivated, but, like, you know, typically, like, if there's some level of commission, that's better for somebody who's money motivated, right? If their thing is, like, I just want to work, and I just want to go home at 5 and not have a care in the world, well, then we probably know some industries to stay away from where that's not the case.
Right.
So, you know, I really just think, like, that is what I always tell them to lean into. Lean into your values, and you will typically end up in a place you're pretty comfortable with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean there's not going to be challenges. But if that's how you got there, it's not a bad decision, in my opinion.
Well, I just love the fact that you're asking them, like basically teaching them to ask questions that they should be asking themselves, because I think that's the most important thing. And I think like if we use sales as an example, I'm going to talk about this later tonight too. I think there are some stereotypical former athlete careers. Not that they, just like working in athletics, like it doesn't mean that you should avoid those. But I think sometimes people try to steer former athletes into careers just because, you should do sales, you should work in athletics, you should be a coach, you should be a sports agent, all these things. And oftentimes there's not someone they can talk to ask them questions. So I think that was really, really strong advice you gave. Like, I just love that you're asking questions and teaching them. And folks, Carlie just gave you some questions you can ask yourself. So,
yeah, the questions, like, it's a challenge. It's uncomfortable sometimes because you're challenging them, and that's where I think there can sometimes be a barrier of like creating this comfortable, open environment. It doesn't mean you can't challenge them within that challenge and support theory, right? Like that's real and it's alive and living in this space, because I don't know what's gonna make them happy. I don't know what they do outside of their practice or competition or my office, so it's really hard to give them that answer. And how else can you help them except help them find it themselves? So
right. Amen. Mic drop. Final question. What advice would you give to your younger self, Carlie, as she was like walking? Do you remember the moment you like walked out of the locker room for the last time? Like, damn, I just played my last game. Like, what advice would you give to her at that moment?
I just got the chills. I'm gonna take it beyond that, from when they changed the code on us to locker room. The last game is one thing. Don't get me wrong. If you're a spring sport, it's a little bit different. But you're still there, right?
Right.
So your world doesn't necessarily change. When it does change, is when you're taking the last 4 years of your life out of your locker in a black trash bag over your shoulder and putting it in your car, and you're like, guess this is it. 'Cause that's what happens.
Yeah.
They got trash bags on the floor, clean out your stuff, somebody new's coming in 2 weeks. So I think that version, I would tell her, not to shy away from what being a student athlete had taught her. So I think, backing that up a little bit, I would say to identify that. And I think there's things you identify over the years in your different phases of life. But I would say don't shy away from that. Like, have confidence in your ability, even if it's not exactly the same as somebody else, or it's not a comfortable situation. Like, lean into what got you to graduate and to play for 4 years.
Okay. That's good. Yeah.
That's what I would say.
I love it. It's so funny. Like, I have this recurring dream. I actually had one last night that I'm trying to get in, like, to the locker room, or I feel like I'm in my locker room in college, but I'm not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And I talk to a lot of
scary.
Yeah, it's kind of like why do so many people have this dream? But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Carlie, this has been phenomenal. Thank you for taking some time to do this today, amongst the many other things you're doing here. Where can people, I'm going to have all your contact info, not all your contact info, okay? But like, where do you want to point people to if they want to get in touch with you or follow you or anything like that?
Yeah, LinkedIn, or probably LinkedIn.
Yeah, let's go LinkedIn. Let's do LinkedIn.
I want to say, I'm just going to go LinkedIn. It's easy. Yeah, but find me on there, reach out. I'm happy to connect with people and just talk.
Perfect. Cool. Well, this has been another great episode of Thrive After Sports. Carlie, you are a prime example of what it means to thrive after sports. So thanks for coming on the show today. Folks, we'll see you on the next episode. Peace.
Thank you.
That was great.